In this video, we're going to be looking at replacing cells in a Prius hybrid battery. Now, this is a Gen 2 Prius hybrid battery, but the principles will, reflect other hybrid vehicle batteries as well. I'll also be talking about some of the parts on the hybrid battery, how it sort of works in a very simplistic view, about the BCM and things like that. So follow along and let's learn something new. If yours is still in the vehicle, then I'll link in the description below a video where I actually removed the battery from the vehicle, so you can follow that along, and then your battery will be removed so you can work on it in the house or wherever is a nice environment for you to work on it. So before I talk about the hybrid battery briefly, we're just going to remove some 10mm bolts, any on the sides here, right here, there's two here, and coming over on the back, one here, a little nut there, a little nut there, and there's none there. So all the 10mm bolts we're going to remove now and get this cover off. So with all those bolts removed, we can just take the cover and remove it, and then we'll have something like this. Now again, the purpose of this video is just to show you how to replace these cells here. Maybe your old cells are bad or you want to test them and then replace them with good cells. But I will explain some of the things in here to make it less daunting so you can do this yourself. And I'll just talk briefly about how this battery pack actually works and what it consists of. Now this battery right here in front of us from the Gen 2 Prius is a giant 201.6 volt NiMH, which stands for nickel metal hydride battery. So if you've ever used these before, this is a rechargeable 1.5 volt battery, again NiMH, nickel metal hydride, and this is a very scaled down version of what you see right here. The principles are exactly the same, except that this one has temperature sensors, it has a brake control module, and a lot of intelligence. But really it's built around the same similar concept, which is just one of these small rechargeable batteries right here. So in this battery here there's 28 modules, and each module is one of these silver rectangles here, and they're connected in series. Now each module itself represents 7.2 volts of the overall voltage of the supply, and when you multiply 7.2 by 28, because there's 28 of them, you get the 201.6 volts. So think of this as a giant 201.6 volt DC battery. So we've talked about the modules and the voltage and whatnot. Let's talk about the capacity. Now this battery pack provides 6.5 amp hours, and that's just a rating to tell you how much amperage a battery can provide for exactly 1 hour. So this is 6500 mAh or 6.5 amp hours, and that's sort of how that is represented. Now each module here, there's 28 of them. Internally within each module there's 6 individual 1.2 volt prismatic NiMH cells inside. You don't really need to know that, but it's just a bit of information so you can understand exactly what you're doing when looking at these cells and how it works. So coming over on this side of the battery pack now, we've talked about the cells themselves. Let's talk about the BCM, or brake control module ECU, which is this little silver box right here. And the silver box here, that's responsible for managing a number of things to do with these cells and the state of charge of them. So in short, if anything really goes wrong with this battery module here, anything in here, this is stored in the brake control module here, and that can feed it back to the ECU of the car to tell you on your dashboard that there's something wrong in the hybrid battery itself. So when you pull the codes, for example, with a special reader, which works with this particular brand of car, so in this case the Gen 2 Prius, it can pull the codes from the BCM itself and it will tell you what's wrong with it. It could be something like a temperature sensor's gone, which is this thing right here, and that reads the temperature of the battery pack. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be a blocked airway, it can't recirculate air and it's overheating. It could be a dead module, maybe module number 14. It really depends, but this is responsible for storing errors such as this. And other than storing errors and whatnot, one of the most important features, it keeps the state of charge of the actual cells, which is around 40 to 80%, uses a shallow cycle. And if you're not familiar with cycling, it's just a cycle. For example, you'll discharge your battery either by using it or whatnot, and then you recharge it again, and that's why it's called a rechargeable battery or rechargeable cell. And when something is shallow cycling, this happens quite quickly, and usually used in cases where you need a quick burst of power. And so when this happens, it's responsible for maintaining these cells and making sure they have a charge between 40 and 80% roughly, something like that. So now I've explained the modules and the BCM and how it all works, it's a bit less daunting to work on because you understand it more. So what we're going to do now is slowly remove these cells. So one of the first things we're going to do is just pop off these end caps right here. So get a small flat head, something like this, and just pry it under here to lift this black thing off these orange tabs, and the front will just pop off. And when they're loose, you can just pull it off and set it to the side. We're going to do this for the whole trim, so this one here, and the same again on the back. So with all those removed, we can just set them aside. This piece right here, it just flops down until we can actually remove it later, so don't worry about that piece right there. So if you have an impact gun, I recommend pulling it out right now because we're going to remove all 56 nuts which actually link these battery modules together. Now it's all these nuts here, they're all 8mm, every single one. There's 28 on the front here, and there's also 28 on the back. We're going to remove every single one, 8mm. So really quickly, if you followed my last video, we talked about a little security dongle here, a safety dongle. It was orange, we pulled it out here. And if you can see here, you can follow these wires along here. They go to these almost middle cells here. So when you remove it here, it makes the battery safer by disconnecting these cells from these cells, making it safer to work on. And that's why we did that when removing this battery. So you can see now how that sort of works. So with all the nuts removed now off the front and rear of the battery, we can just pull these off. They just come off real quick, and now our modules are disconnected from each other, so they're no longer in series. So we're just going to do this on the front and the back of the battery. So with those removed from the battery now, so the modules are no longer connected in series, we can actually access these here, which are called bus bars, and we can actually pop them out of their orange surrounding here. We're going to pop every single one out, and on the rear of the battery, they're also present here. They're just hiding behind a little terminal here. So what you have to do is pop it out, move the terminal out of the way, and then we can access the bus bar. We're just going to take them all out, every single one, and put them in here with our nuts, because we're going to clean these up. So now we have a jar here full of all of our bus bars, which have corrosion on, as well as all the nuts as well. So two things you should always have in your kitchen: vinegar, baking soda. Baking soda, great for heartburn, cleaning teeth, anything like that, but also cleaning kitchens, as well as the white vinegar, which acts as an acid. And together, they're going to actually clean our bus bars and nuts on this battery. So we want 2 parts vinegar, 1 part baking soda. If you don't have baking soda, vinegar usually works just as well. And this is good for cleaning old coins and things like that. You know, it has endless uses, these two things. So we're just going to drop the baking soda in now. So it doesn't have to be accurate, just, you know, thereabouts. I think that'll do it. So you can see there, carbon dioxide. Science is great, isn't it? So while that reaction's happening, we're just going to set this to one side and work on the remainder of our battery. So these bus bar cover assemblies here, we can just move these to one side out of the way, and that exposes our cells a bit better to work on. So now we're going to remove these vent tubes here, which is connected to this white piece right here. That's just in case any pressure ever builds up in these modules. There's a small hole connecting into here. It can be vented away and out of the way. So that's what it was originally designed to do. And with that, you can just sort of slowly pry it up, and you can see it's plugged into each module here for that reason. So a tip, if you remove that quite fast, it sounds like a piano. A little random knowledge you really don't care about, but there it is. This here is a temperature sensor which is connected to these green wires. So as I briefly mentioned before, the brake control unit at the end over there reads the temperature of these modules. And that's how it protects itself from overheating. So with this we just insert a flathead underneath and then we can pop it out of this bracket right here. With that removed there, we can just unclip these plastic brackets here from the bar here, and just remove it and push it out of the way. Okay, now there's two 10mm nuts, one right here, coming over on the opposite corner over here. There's also one just down there. We're going to take those two nuts off. So the last thing, I'm just going to remove this little plastic piece right here. And now we're going to flip the whole battery pack upside down. When turning upside down, make sure these plastic parts here aren't sitting on top, because this is quite heavy. You don't want to be crushing anything like this. Make sure they're fully out of the way and that the weight is supported on as much of the frame as possible. So with the battery pack flipped upside down, you can see here that each module is actually bolted to the frame assembly itself. So we need to remove every single bolt here. There's, I believe, 14 on each side, making 28. So pretty much one per module there. And just like the bus bar nuts, they're also 8mm, but these have a Phillips head as well. So with all those bolts removed on the underside now, there's nothing holding the actual modules to the case. So what we can do is just lift and push it out of the way, pending a couple of temperature sensors underneath. So the temperature sensors, they're just clipped onto a couple of modules here by one of these, sort of like a spider clip. So you just insert a flathead on the end here and it just hooks off. So something like that. And then it will just come right off. And you can repeat that for the black one here and also the blue one on the end. When reinstalling those afterwards, just make sure they're spaced out how they were before, so it can pick up a general reading from the whole area. That's why they're spaced out. So the sensors here, as the BCM we talked about is responsible for reading sensor readings, it's only apt that the harness here goes into the BCM. So to remove this from the rest of the battery pack, we can just remove that piece there, and now we have our cells by themselves, all the modules, all 28, disconnected from all of that stuff there. So now we can begin to replace these. So I'll flip the battery pack back over so we can see the top side now. And what we want to do is disconnect these compression blocks, which are designed just to keep the modules together, so we can start popping off the modules here. Before we do that, we need to talk about polarity real quick, which is something very important in DC circuits. So I won't bore you with AC and DC circuits, it's not really what we're here for, we're just here to disassemble a hybrid battery. DC circuits, the current flows in one direction only, and it can flow from negative to positive or positive to negative. The difference being that's what your polarity is. Now if you notice at the end of these modules here, this one's positive, negative, and they're all connected in series. So it's important when we reassemble this, that this corner here, you can see a positive sign on this module right here, that this remains here when we reassemble it with new modules or whatever you choose to do. So the easiest way to do that is to either remember it or just mark here that this one is a positive right here. This one on this side is a negative, and to be doubly safe, which I'm sure there's no need to, that way nothing can ever go wrong. Now we know the orientation of the modules and exactly how they should go back in according to the rules of DC circuitry. So with that done, we're going to remove these four 12mm bolts off the end right here. So with the compression block off this side, we can just pretty much remove the modules, very easy, and that's how they come out. They're not actually attached to the bars themselves, they're just slotted in here, and you can see if we look really closely, there's a few plastic notches here that just helps keep them in line, and that's as easy as that. So one thing I'll mention, well, this battery pack here is from a Gen2 Prius, which is years 2004 to 2009. The individual modules here actually fit numerous hybrid cars, so an incomplete list If you only want these, then they're compatible with Prius 2004 to 2015, Toyota Camry 07 to 16, Nissan Altima 07 to 11, Lexus CT200 and some others 2011 to 15, and Yukon, Tahoe and Escalade 08 to 13. So they actually fit a wide range of hybrid assemblies in all those vehicles. So with the bus bars and nuts here, I'm just putting them in the bathtub. So you can see a lot of that greenery there is the oxidization, which is a byproduct of some of the copper here. And you can see they've cleaned up quite nicely. What you may need or may choose to do is just get a rag and rub off the rest of the residue. If they don't come out as clean, you can always give it another go or use less baking soda in the mixture, baking powder. And that way you can get them as clean as possible, and with good conduction gives a good battery. But there are compromises to be made if they're used. So okay, let's get back on with it. So the longer really you leave them in the acidic vinegar solution, the better they're going to come out. If you have something like a ultrasonic cleaner for jewelry, you know, that works great too. But I think this is a good compromise for our purposes. Let's continue. So for those of you that are just replacing your cells, you want to get on your way, I'll leave you with some torque specs real quick. Now the bus bar nuts, they're the ones in the vinegar right now. 60 inch-pounds when you put those back on. The corner block bolts, so the two diagonal ones we did here, 90 inch-pounds. The 28 cell bolts, which went on the underside of it, 60 inch-pounds. And the four 12mm compression bolts on the side here, 24 foot-pounds. That's all the torque specs I believe you'll need to put this back together, and you can be on the way. Assembly is pretty much the reversal of disassembly. Remember to space out your temperature sensors and whatnot and get on your way. Now, if for those of you who want to stick around and learn a bit about cells and how to charge them reconditioning, I'll just talk about that really quickly. But the purpose of this video, it's a disassembly video, so we'll get on with that. For those of you sticking around, you probably paid hundreds of dollars on these new modules here, and you might be wondering, oh well, do my old modules have value? Can I recondition them? Can I get some sort of money for them? Well, the short answer, yes. It depends. Now your old modules, you could sell them as spares and repairs or something on eBay, and someone can, you know, take a look, and all that work is off your hands. You know, you can get some of the money you put on the new ones back on your old ones, something like that. If you want to dig deeper and see if these can actually be salvaged, I'll talk about that real quickly. So these modules here, it's not like a lead acid battery in a car where you can pop the top it off with distilled water and be on your way. It's very different. Once it's out the factory, it's a closed system. So how do you recondition these? So usually to recondition these, what mechanics would do that have the specialist equipment with these modules here, that load them all up, the machine would take in all the modules, however many you have, and they would charge them, discharge them, charge them, discharge them, take them through a cycle to try and recondition them. Once that's done, they will load test them, and what that is, I'll explain momentarily. Now, how do you know if one of these modules is good? If you look to buy them on eBay, what they do, the sellers that is, they'll just measure the voltage. So you put a probe on each side of the module here, positive and negative, connect it to a multimeter, and they'll say, oh, our modules measure at 7.8 volts, our modules are 7.4 volts, they're great. But however, a voltage, a simple voltage like this, is not a good guarantee that the module is fine. However, it's a good indicator of sorts, but it's not a good guarantee, and I'll talk about that, you know, why that is. So have you ever charged your phone to 100% in a phone where it has a dying battery, for example? It will say 100%. However, when you start using the phone, which is, I guess, called a load test, say you start recording a video, you might notice your battery drops awfully quickly. It might go to 80, 70, 60 within a space of 2 minutes. And that's because you're actually putting a load on the battery of the dying phone. So if you're using a bad battery, it'll decrease quite quickly, and that's a test that guarantees, you know, how good a module is. So this module might read 7.15 volts, for example. However, when I start putting a load on this, which could be a light, it could be pretty much anything that runs on DC power, then we have to see how quickly it drops in voltage, and that is actually how we, make sure that these are good. And in a professional capacity, they have machines that do this. You load them all up, it'll put a load on them and tell you really quickly. In a hobbyist way, when you're doing it yourself at home, you might want to connect a headlight bulb or something like that and then start a timer, and that's how you would load test these. So I will talk about how you can load test these if you're curious. You want to know how good your modules are. Maybe you want to sell them or whatnot. It's really up to you. Now to charge these, remember at the start of the video we talked about these modules. They're 7.2 volts each out of the factory, the OEM ones. So we need a 7.2 volt charger. Now, if you connect two of these together in series, so here we have terminals on the end, we can connect them in series. And then the voltage doubles. So if we have a 14.4 volt charger, or 14 or something thereabouts, we can charge two of these together in series. I have a laptop charger, it's 21 volts right here. So AC input, DC output, DC modules, that's good for us. So the DC output, 21 volts. Now, three of these together is 21.6 volts. So this would charge three of them in series, really well, and that's all I have available. If you have a hobby charger that can, change voltage and whatnot, that's exactly what you need. But for people who don't, then something like this would work quite well. So with here, talking about polarity, which we touched on before, you see that pin in there, that would be either positive or negative, and the outside shell here, the case, will be the opposite. So if the middle is negative, the shell here would be positive, or vice versa, depending on the polarity. And that's why they're separated by this yellow plastic, so they don't touch each other. So what you would do, get a little crocodile clip and just tap that little pin in there and get another one around here, and then you have your supply for charging three of these modules. So that's an example how you could actually try and charge and discharge these at home. And I neglected to mention, when charging these, I think a 3 amp charge is okay. A 1 amp charge is preferable. I'd say a 5 amp charge is too much, but it's really up to you. And when I say discharge, now that's a problem if you don't have a hobby charger that's capable of discharging things. You'll just have to let it sit or put a load on it and try and discharge it that way. So what you want to do when you're reconditioning these, as I talked about, you charge them, discharge them, charge them, discharge them. That's how you recondition this type of battery, the NiMH battery. Now, talking about load testing, so once you've reconditioned it, you've put a charge on it, connect it to a multimeter. So there's probes on each side here. So we'll just put some alligator clips on the side, and this goes into our multimeter here, which we have set at DC volts 20, and it comes on at 7.15 volts. So when load testing these, open up Excel spreadsheet, create 28 rows, one for each module. Record the starting voltage, so this is after they're all charged up, 7.15. Now what we want to do is put a load on these, so it could be a headlight bulb or something like that. Once you've put the load on, so pretty much just connect it to a headlight bulb, that would be perfect, something like that. Once you put the load on, start a timer, and then it's up to you how long you want that timer to run for. The longer the better, but it does take more time. Once you've chosen a time, whether it's 30 minutes, something like that, record the ending voltage. And this would be a suitable load test of something actually using these modules in action. Once you've done the exact same test for every single module with the starting voltage, the ending voltage, and everything in between, you know exactly how the modules compare to each other, so it's a good indicator of which ones are good and which ones are bad. So in a very simplistic view, with minimal equipment, this is how you would do a load test at home. So now we've talked about load testing, how to make sure that these modules are actually good by attaching a load to them, and also why a quick voltage reading is not a good indicator of the quality of a module, and how to charge them and discharge them. I will talk about one more thing, which is called Dr. Prius. Now, if you have a working Prius, your battery's connected, you suspect a bad module or something like that, so these are for people who actually have the working Prius, You can use some software called Dr. Prius, which runs on your phone. It comes with a dongle that connects to the OBDII port, which is under your dash, and it can read the codes from the BCM, which is this guy right here. And it can actually read off real-time voltages from a pair of modules, so two of them, and this is a pretty good indicator of which modules do need replacing. So it might be like modules 1 and 2, you know, they read a good voltage. 3 and 4, they read good. And again, you can see all of them, but if a couple of them, a pair of them, are a lot lower than the others in terms of voltage, you can suspect these two to be quite bad. So in which case you would only need to buy a couple modules and not necessarily a whole battery pack, because what people do, they'll try and upsell you and sell you a whole new thing when really you only might need 2 or 4 modules. So I thought I would mention that for people who do have working Priuses and, you know, can actually take advantage of this before taking everything apart and buying things they don't necessarily need. Okay, so I appreciate that's a wealth of information, but pause the video, go back, you know, learn about DC voltages and whatnot to make it feel more, you know, native and comfortable to you. But again, follow the start of this video to replace your cells. Very easy to do. It's just nuts and bolts. All the tools I use in the video I'll link in the description below. And again, if you didn't check out my battery removal process, I'll link that in the description below so you can learn how to actually remove this from the vehicle. It's quite heavy, you know, a good 80-90 pounds, so be prepared for that. But otherwise, yeah, that's the end of the video. Thanks for hanging in there if you stayed till the end, and please like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. Take care.